see you.
All ready? Okay. Ready? Okay. All right. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Chris Turner. I'm a state representative from Arlington and Grand Prairie in Tarrant County for House District 101. I also serve as the chair of the Texas House Democratic Caucus. And today, myself, a number of my colleagues, and some very special guests are going to speak to you about the horrific voter suppression bills that Texas Republicans are trying to pass. First, I'd like to recognize several members of the House Democratic Caucus who are here. Not all the members here who will be speaking today. We have Representative Jean Wu. We have Representative Cheryl Cole, Representative Aaron Zwiener, Representative Ron Reynolds, the first Vice Chair of the House Democratic Caucus, Representative Tony Rose, Representative Carl Sherman, Representative Vicki Goodwin, Representative Ann Johnson, Representative Jarvis Johnson, Representative Julie Johnson, Johnson, Dr. Alma Allen from Houston, our House Democratic Whip, Representative John Busey, and that same member of the House Elections Committee, Representative Jessica González, who I'll introduce more formally here in just a moment, Representative Marianne Perez, Representative Sergio Munoz, Representative Christina Morales, and Chairwoman Nicole Collier of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus, who you'll also hear from in a few moments. And we're so honored today to be joined by two of our strongest champions in our nation's capital, people who have fought day in and day out their entire careers for more opportunity, for better health care, for better education, for good jobs, and yes, for the right to vote. It's Congressman Lloyd Doggett and Congressman Joaquín Castro. We're so honored to have them with us today, and you'll be hearing from them in a few moments. So, make no mistake, House Bill 6, Senate Bill 7, both these bills are vote suppression bills. They are intended to make it harder for Texans to cast a ballot. And this is in spite of the fact that the Texas Republican Secretary of State's office has said the 2020 election was safe, was secure, was smooth, despite the fact that Governor Greg Abbott, when asked a few weeks ago as he was promoting these vote suppression bills, he was asked, "Governor, was there fraud in the 2020 elections?" He said, "Well, I can't think of any. I don't know of any, but there may have been." That's not good enough to bring as a reason to bring vote suppression bills to the Texas Capitol. We know that shamefully Texas has a long and dark history of systematically disenfranchising and suppressing the votes of African American and Hispanic Texans. And as our state becomes more diverse and continues to grow, and that growth is fueled by the tremendous growth in communities of color, the Hispanic community, the African American community, yes, the Asian American community as well, these bills are all the more offensive for that reason. And I will tell you today that the 67 members of the House Democratic Caucus, we come from all over this state, from Beaumont to El Paso, from the Valley to North Texas, and we stand united in opposition to any attempts to make it more difficult for our constituents to vote. Texas already has some of the worst voter suppression laws in the country. We make it hard to vote, We make it hard to register to vote. Texas makes it hard to register other people to vote. And that's what's wrong in Texas today. Those are the issues we should be addressing in the Texas legislature, not new attempts to make it harder to vote, not new attempts to make it harder to register to vote, and not new ways to make it easier to harass and intimidate voters and election workers at the polls. And so those are the things you'll see Democrats on the House floor today talking about, fighting against, and the principles we'll be standing for. And so with that, it is my privilege to introduce the Vice Chair of the House Elections Committee, Representative Jessica González, who for the last several months, this entire session, along with Representative Busey, Representative Fierro, and Representative Beckley, have fought day in and day out every time this Elections Committee has met against House Bill 6, against SB 7, and numerous other vote suppression bills. We're thankful for her leadership. We're grateful for her leadership. And it's my pleasure to introduce Jessica González.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, as a woman of color who has worked in the Department of Justice, working on these issues, and for someone who led the charge on the voter protection efforts in Nevada in 2012, I know what discrimination looks like, and this is, and HB 6 is just that. It's old Jim Crow dressed up in what Republicans are calling election integrity. What we can't deny is Texas's history, long history, of using racially gerrymandered legislature and blatant attempts to pass legislation that is aimed and has the effect of disenfranchising people of color. Yet here we are again. And this happens every session, but this is by far one of the worst pieces of legislation that Texas has seen. And I won't go into all the dangerous provisions of HB 6, but I will say that after 20 plus hours of testimony, of people testifying about the dangerous effect that this bill will have on Texan voters, this bill was still rammed through committee, and we're still being forced to hear it, despite the outcries from the public about not wanting a legislation like this to pass in Texas. You know, we're Texans, we take pride in our state, we take pride in who we are, where we come from, and we must do better than this. We have to do better than this. I know that as Democrats, we're going to fight with every breath today to make sure that nobody's voice is silenced at the ballot box. And if this bill passes and becomes law in the state of Texas, it will be a very, very dark day in Texas. And so we're hoping to have that debate. We're hoping to change some minds, you know, and hopefully minimize the damage that this bill will cause. And if we have to go all night, that's what we have to do. We're going to fight really hard to make sure that no one's voice is ever silenced here in Texas. And so thank you, and I will pass it back to, or who am I? Oh, sorry. Chair Nicole Collier.
Thank you, Representative Vice Chair González. You know, they say everything is bigger in Texas. That couldn't be even more true about the way Texas has repeatedly attempted to disenfranchise people of color and suppress our votes. From the long ago time of Black Code laws that birthed the Jim Crow era, where we saw literacy tests implemented before you could vote that excluded white people under the guise of a grandfather clause because they could vote before. We saw poll taxes required. You had to pay to play with voting, to gerrymandering. HB 6 is no different. Senate Bill 7 is no different. It's another attempt to disenfranchise and make it harder for people to vote. It empowers those same poll workers who were originally created to intimidate people of color voters. It empowers them to encourage them to deter voters. This is not about bringing more people to the polls. This is not about protecting the polls. It's to keep you away from the polls. We already do that now. We have one of the most strictest measures in place, Texas does, when it comes down to providing voting integrity, when it comes down to voting regulations. We already have voter ID. I don't know what else they want other than my blood. So today, we will stand against HB 6, SB 7, because they are remnants of the past. And we don't want to go back to the past. We want to move forward. We must move forward, and we must be inclusive of everyone in this state and allow them to exercise their right and not be criminalized under HB 6 or SB 7 for minor mistakes. Minor mistakes. We don't want to see these criminalized. We talk about criminal justice reform. This is not reform. These are penalties for people who attempt to exercise their right to vote. So we will stand with the voters and be their voice today and talk against this bill. We will work this bill hard to make sure that we make it better or try to take it down for the people of Texas. And we stand united as Democrats. And we thank everybody for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Nicole Collier, Chair of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus, for your leadership and your words. Next, we'll bring up Congressman Lloyd Doggett, and followed by Congressman Joaquín Castro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. You know, lasting success cannot be built on blocking access, but it's understandable that Republicans who've gone soft on sedition, soft on political violence, soft on lies, and soft on fantasies rely on suppression in an attempt to cling to power. We favor turning out the votes, not throwing out the voters. I'm here, first of all, just to honor the courage and the tenacity of each of these state representatives. They keep telling Texans the truth about what is happening in this beautiful building. It is an ugly truth. While there is so much competition this year for the worst bill, certainly House Bill 6 and Senate Bill 7 are the ugliest. You can't scrub off the ugly with a steel brush. Not even a Trump bleach injection could clean up these bills. Ugly. Ugly because they go to the heart of our democracy. What sports team attempts to win by blocking the opposition from coming on the playing field or the basketball court? I'll answer my own question. Losers. Republicans are so very fearful of the strength of empowered Texans voting that they are desperately attempting to add even more tools to their overloaded voter suppression toolbox. Texas is already ground zero for voter suppression. One recent study found that our state was the most difficult place to vote in the entire nation. But based on the record turnout of Texans last year to overcome those obstacles, what is the Republican response? We haven't made it difficult enough. They now seek to erect these outrageous, destructive barriers. It's as if they conceived this legislation by posing the phony question, how can we do even more to keep Texans of color away from the voting booth? These bills are the sorry answer to that question. So to protect every Texan and to protect the heartbeat of our democracy, every neighbor, every business needs to speak out. I salute almost 50 businesses that have spoken out against this suppression. They know that suppression doesn't create a stable business environment, but we need more. Silence isn't an option here. You either condone suppression or you stand up for democracy. State Republican leaders here in Texas appear like they're